وإذ قال إبراهيم رب أرني كيف تحيي الموتى قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن.
Long after Adam and his descendants began to walk the earth, long after the first prayers and the first bloodshed, humanity spread far and wide. What started as small families grew into villages, villages into towns, and towns into cities. Civilization in its earliest form began to flourish under the open sky. But with growth came forgetfulness, and with forgetfulness came rebellion. The message that Adam had carried, the message of one God, of truth, of justice, began to fade from memory. As new generations were born, fewer remembered the warnings. Fewer bowed their heads in prayer. Instead, they looked inward, building shrines to their own egos and carving idols from stone and wood. It was not an overnight change. It was slow, like the creeping of shadows at dusk. It started with whispers, the idea that wealth meant power, that beauty meant worth, that the unseen Lord could be replaced with things that could be touched, held, controlled. Slowly, the hearts of mankind began to shift, hardening against the truth. The descendants of Adam, once blessed with guidance, began to worship false gods. Statues were erected, not as art, but as devotion. Rituals emerged, but not the rituals of obedience to Allah. These were rituals of vanity, of self-worship, of excess. The simple lessons of humility and repentance were buried under pride and arrogance. The Quran tells us that in these the early days, people became corrupt, not just in worship, but in action. Injustice spread like a disease. The strong preyed on the weak, the rich crushed the poor. Greed overtook gratitude. Violence replaced peace. The earth, once given to man as a trust, became a stage for oppression and desire. But even then, Allah did not abandon them. He sent reminders. He sent signs. He whispered through the winds, through the birth of children, through the setting of the sun and the rising of the moon. But the people would not listen. They covered their ears, closed their eyes, and hardened their hearts. This is where the next chapter begins. A world teetering on the edge of destruction, not from war and natural disaster, but from the weight of its own arrogance. In this world, a man stood tall, not in pride, but in faith. His name was Nuh. His voice, soft at first, would soon echo louder than the storms. His story, though ancient, is our mirror. His message, though spoken in the past, is for us today. This is the descent of humanity, and this is the beginning of a flood that would wash the world clean. In the midst of a world darkened by pride and rebellion, one man stood apart. He was not of royal blood, not a man of wealth or armies, but a humble, patient servant of Allah. His name was Nuh, known to many as Noah, and he was chosen by his Lord to remind his people of the truth they had buried under their own arrogance. Nuh's lineage traced back to Adam himself, a direct link to the first man who had walked the earth, and with it, a sacred responsibility. Nuh was not sent with weapons, he was sent with words, gentle at first, filled with compassion and warning. Day after day, he walked among his people. He called them not to his own name, but to the name of Allah, the one who created them, who sustained them, who watched their every action. He reminded them of the earth's blessings, the rains that fell, the crops that grew, the children that laughed, the homes that sheltered them. He warned them of the consequence of pride, of injustice, of turning away from the truth. His words were not harsh. They were filled with hope. He spoke of repentance, of mercy, of a return to the path of righteousness. But the people laughed at him. They mocked his sincerity, called him a fool, accused him of madness. They said, "You are but a man like us. Why should we follow you? If Allah wanted to guide us, He would have sent angels." Their hearts were hard, their ears closed. They clung to their idols, to their wealth, to the false security of numbers. They could not imagine a world beyond their own desires. And so Nuh's call fell on deaf ears. But he did not stop. For years, decades, he continued his mission. He preached in the streets, in the marketplaces, in the quiet corners of homes. He whispered to the old. He spoke to the young. He approached the rich and the poor alike. His patience was fast, his heart unwavering. His message was simple. Turn back to Allah before it is too late. Leave behind your false gods. Return to the worship of the one who created you. Yet with each passing year, the rejection grew sharper. Some even warned others not to listen to him, whispering that he would lead them astray. Nuh's own people, the descendants of those whom Allah had once favored, now mocked his messenger. But Nuh, though saddened, did not abandon them. He knew that guidance was not his to give, it was Allah's alone. His task was to deliver the message, to be a warner and a mercy. In moments of solitude, Nuh lifted his hands to the sky, his voice trembling with sorrow. He prayed, not for revenge, but for his people's hearts to soften. He begged Allah to show them a sign, to turn their hearts back to the truth. And Allah heard. But he also knew that these people had made their choice. They had buried themselves in pride so deep that only a great storm could cleanse them. This was not just the story of Nuh. It was the story of every generation that refuses truth, of every soul that turns away from mercy. His call was not just for his people, it was a call for us. For those of us who hear truth yet turn away. For those who see signs yet deny them. For those who place their trust in things other than Allah. As Nuh's voice echoed through the streets one last time, a shadow was already gathering on the horizon. A storm was coming, not of rain alone, but of judgment. And the patience of the Prophet, though vast, was nearing its end.
قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
Nuh's voice rang out in the streets, across the valleys, through the market squares, and in the silence of the night. His call was gentle but unyielding. "O my people, worship Allah. You have no deity other than Him. Will you not fear Him?" His words, though humble, carried the weight of centuries. He was not calling for wealth, not seeking power, not asking for loyalty to himself. His call was simple, to turn back to the Creator and to abandon the false gods of stone and wood and to remember the purpose of their existence. But the people scoffed at him. They rolled their eyes, laughed behind his back, and hurled insults to his face. You are just a man like us," they said. "Why should we believe you? You eat and drink as we do. You walk the streets as we do. If Allah had truly sent a messenger, He would have sent an angel, not a poor man with no followers." They pointed at the small group that gathered around Nuh, the few who believed in his message. They were the weak, the poor, the outcasts, farmers, herders, simple folk with little status. "Look at those who follow you," the disbelievers jeered. "Do you expect us, the noble ones, to stand beside them? If you want us to believe, cast them out first, and then perhaps we will listen. But Nu's response was firm. He said, "Shall I drive away those who believe? Shall I betray those who have accepted the truth? For the sake of pleasing you, their accountability is to Allah alone, as is yours. I will not cast them away. I am only a warner, a messenger." The people's rejection deepened. They mocked him openly, calling him a liar, a madman, a fool. They whispered among themselves, warning others not to listen to his words, not to be swayed by his gentle voice. They surrounded him with jeers, throwing stones at his home, laughing as he walked by. Some even covered their ears when he spoke, clenching their fists and turning their backs. But Nu did not waver. Year after year, decade after decade, he continued his call. His patience was ocean deep, his love for his people unwavering. He knew that Allah's mercy was vast, that even the hardest heart could soften if it turned to the truth. He warned them of the consequences of their arrogance, reminded them of the blessings they were wasting, of the earth that could swallow them, of the sky that could rain down justice. But his words fell like whispers against a stone wall. As generations passed, the people's corruption grew darker. They oppressed the weak, worshipped idols with greater fervor, and turned gatherings of remembrance into festivals of vanity. They filled the air with pride, proclaiming their strength, their wealth, their control over their own destinies. They built towering structures, boasting of their permanence, and they carved their names into stone, believing they would live forever. But beneath the surface, their souls were empty, starving for truth. No, seeing their hearts harden, turned to his Lord in sorrow. "Oh, my Lord," he cried, "I have called my people night and day, but my calling has only increased them in flight. Indeed, every time I invited them that you might forgive them, they thrust their fingers into their ears, covered themselves with their garments, persisted, and were arrogant with great arrogance. Then I invited them publicly. Then I announced to them, and I spoke to them privately." Surah Nur 71, 5-9. Even as he poured his heart into his mission, the rejection remained. His people's pride was not simple stubbornness. It was a rebellion against truth itself. They did not just reject Nu, they rejected Allah. They mocked not just the man, but the message. The years turned into centuries. Nu's beard grew white. His voice, though still strong, carried the weariness of time. But his hope never faded. Even as his own people plotted to silence him, even as they conspired to erase his name, he continued to speak, because he knew that his mission was not to change hearts. That was Allah's domain. His task was to deliver the message, and the first to drop.
قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
To warn, to plead, to hope, until the last door of mercy closed. But that door was beginning to creak shut, and the first drops of judgment were already gathering in the skies. As Nu's voice echoed one last time, rising above the mocking laughter of his people, the heavens themselves seemed to listen. For centuries he had called them, gently, patiently, with words of hope and warnings of justice. But the hearts of his people had turned to stone. Their ears were deaf, their eyes blinded, their souls shackled to pride. And now, after centuries of patient calling, Allah sent the command that would change the world forever. In the stillness of the night, Nu lifted his hands in desperate prayer. His voice trembled not with anger, but with the sorrow of knowing that his people were beyond turning back. "My lord," he whispered, "do not leave upon the earth from among the disbelievers even one inhabitant. For if you leave them, they will mislead your servants and will beget only wicked and ungrateful descendants." Surah Nuh 71:26-27. And Allah answered, not with wrath, but with a command. "Build this ship," he said. A command so simple, yet so profound, that it would reshape the destiny of the earth. Nuh was to build an ark, not a small boat, not a raft, but a massive vessel, sturdy enough to ride out the coming flood. This was not just a ship. It was a symbol of Allah's mercy for the believers and his justice against the arrogant. Nuh did not question. He did not ask why or how. He obeyed. He gathered wood, shaped planks, and began the slow, deliberate construction of the ark. His hands, those urged, worked with strength given by faith. He worked not alone, for a few believers, men and women whose hearts still held the light of truth, joined him. Together, they built under the scorching sun, their sweat mingling with prayer, their labor driven by a hope that the world could not understand. But as the ship took shape, the people's mockery grew louder. They gathered around the construction site, pointing, laughing, jeering. "Have you gone mad, old man?" they shouted. "A ship in the middle of the desert. There is no sea here, no river. You are building for a flood that will never come." Their words, sharp as blades, cut through the air. Children threw stones. The wealthy scoffed. Even Nuh's own family, his wife and one of his sons, refused to believe. But Nuh's resolve did not falter. He looked at them with a mixture of sadness and unshaken determination. "You may mock us now," he said, "but we will see who is mocked when the punishment of Allah comes upon you." Surah Hud 11:38. He continued his work plank by plank, nail by nail, as the massive ark rose from the dust, a silent monument of faith amidst a sea of disbelief. The ark was not just a vessel for survival. It was a testament to obedience in the face of ridicule. Every hammer stroke echoed with the unspoken challenge. Would you choose to follow truth or continue to mock until it was too late? The people saw it only as a madness, a foolish old man building a boat on dry land. But to those who believed, it was a symbol of salvation, a proof that Allah's word is truth and His promise is certain. As the final planks were set and the great vessel stood complete, Nuh looked to the sky. The clouds, once distant, now gathered dark and heavy. The winds shifted, the earth trembled beneath his feet. He knew the time was near. And still, one last time, he turned to his people, his voice filled with the weight of centuries of warning. "Enter the ark," he called, "for the flood is coming. Save yourselves, save your children." But they laughed louder than ever before, their voices rising in defiance as the first distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. The door of mercy was closing. The ark stood ready. The believers gathered at its base, their faces turned to the darkening heavens. And Nuh, the patient prophet, waited not for the flood waters, but for Allah's command. Embark. The storm was coming. Not just rain, not just water, but a flood that would wash the earth of its arrogance and leave behind only the faithful.
قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
As Nuh stood before the completed ark, the wind that whispered around him felt heavier, cooler, charged with a tension that even the most mocking of his people could not fully ignore. The skies darkened, not with the gentle grey of passing clouds, but with a foreboding that pressed down on the land itself. Still, the people scoffed, crossing their arms and shaking their heads. "Where is your flood, old man?" they taunted. "We have seen your ark, but we see no water. You have wasted your years." But none knew. He felt it in his bones, in the quiet shifting of the air, in the tremble of the earth beneath his feet. These were not the signs of ordinary storms. These were the first drops of divine judgment, a response to centuries of disbelief and mockery. His heart ached not with fear, but with sorrow, for he knew what was to come, and he knew most of his people would not survive it. The Quran tells us, "Until when our command came, and the oven gushed forth with water, we said, load upon the ship of each creature 2 mates and your family, except those about whom the word has preceded, and include whoever has believed. But none had believed with him except a few." Surah Hud 11:14. The signs became undeniable. Water began to gush forth, not from the sky at first, but from the earth itself. Fissures opened, and water erupted from the ground, flooding streets, homes, and marketplaces. The earth, which had once been their stage of arrogance, now turned against them. The skies grew darker, the clouds heavier. The winds howled with a force that bent trees and tore at the edges of the horizon. Animals began to move in strange patterns, gathering in pairs around the ark as though responding to a command only they could hear. Nu called out one final time. His voice, though tired, carried urgency. "Oh, my people," he pleaded, "come to the ark. There is still time. Allah's mercy is fast, but his justice is coming. Save yourselves, enter the ship, and turn back to your Lord." But his people, their hearts hardened beyond rescue, only laughed louder. "You have lost your mind, no. There is no flood. These are but springs overflowing. The rain will pass." Nu's eyes searched the crowd. His heart twisted with pain as he saw his own wife standing among the mockers. She shook her head, unwilling to join him, unwilling to believe. He called to his son, his voice breaking with emotion. "Oh, my son, come with us. Do not be with the disbelievers." But the boy, filled with the arrogance of youth and the blindness of disbelief, refused. He pointed to the towering mountains in the distance. "I will take refuge there," he said, "and the water will not reach me." Nu's voice rose over the roar of the wind. "There is no refuge today except in the mercy of Allah." Surah Hud 11:43. But his son turned away. Then the first drops fell from the sky, heavy, cold, relentless. The ground, already trembling with the force of water from below, now met the downpour from above. It was as if the sky itself had broken open and the earth had surrendered its depths. The people's laughter faded, replaced by shouts of confusion and fear. They ran in all directions, seeking high ground, but it was too late. The mountains that had once symbolized safety now trembled under the weight of the deluge. Allah's command was clear. Imba yak. And so, Nuh and the few who believed with him, men, women, children, and pairs of every creature, entered the ark. The massive door creaked shut, sealing them in solid. The rains intensified, the water rising with terrifying speed. Villages disappeared beneath the waves, fields turned to seas. The laughter of the mockers was silenced by the roar of water and wind. Inside the ark, Nuh closed his eyes. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from grief.
He knew that outside his son was being swept away. His wife too would not survive. The world he had once known, the homes, the towns, the faces, was dissolving into a sea of divine justice. But inside the ark, there was still hope, still mercy, still a chance for humanity to begin again. The flood had come. Not just water, not just stone, but a cleansing, a reset. And the ark was the only vessel of salvation left afloat.
ولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
The skies broke open with a roar. The rain, thick and merciless, fell in torrents, crashing against the earth like the fists of 1,000 storms. From the ground, water surged upward in violent geysers, as if the very bones of the world were cracking and weeping. The floodwaters rose with terrifying speed, swallowing valleys, homes, and the tallest structures. Trees vanished beneath waves, fields turned into endless seas. The earth, which had once been firm and steady beneath human feet, was now a churning ocean of judgment. Within the ark, Noor stood silent, his hands trembling as he gripped the wooden railing. The sounds outside, the panicked cries, the crashing waves, the mournful bellow of animals were muffled by the walls of the vessel. The believers huddled together, whispered prayers. Their faith was the only anchor amidst the chaos. Above them, the wooden beams groaned under the weight of the water, but the ark held firm, just as Allah had promised. The Quran describes this moment with solemn gravity. So we opened the gates of the heaven with rain pouring down, and we caused the earth to gush forth with springs, so the waters made for matter already predestined. Surah Al-Qamar 54:11-12. It was not a random storm. It was a divine decree. A flood both from the heavens above and the earth below. Perfectly measured, perfectly timed. The judgment had arrived not out of cruelty, but out of justice. The people who had mocked, laughed, and rejected Noah's warnings now clung to rocks and trees, their voices raised in desperation. Nah, save us, let us come aboard. But the time for mercy had passed. Noah's own heart ached, but he knew he could do nothing. The command of Allah had been sealed. The flood was not his to stop. His pleas, his prayers for his people had been made for centuries. Now the earth itself had answered. Noah's son, once so confident in his defiance, was among the desperate. He had climbed a high mountain, believing it would protect him from the rising waters. But the flood surged higher than any mountain peak, swallowing the proud cliffs and towers alike. Noah called to him one last time, his voice breaking. "Oh, my son, come with us and do not be with the disbelievers." But the son, lost to arrogance, was swept away. Noah's eyes filled with tears, but he bowed his head in submission. He knew that even family ties could not stand against the truth of Allah's decree. The ark rose higher, lifted by the surging sea. It bobbed and tilted, but never capsized. Inside, the believers clung to each other, praying through the storm. The animals huddled together in frightened silence. The sounds of creation's fury filled the air, the shrieking wind, the crashing waves, the thunder rumbling like the voice of justice itself. For days and nights, the ark drifted across the world that was no longer recognizable. There was no land in sight, no birds in the sky. only endless water and the relentless roar of nature's power. The sun was hidden behind the thick, swirling clouds. The moon, if it still existed, was unseen. But inside the ark, a flicker of light remained, the light of faith, the light of Allah's promise. Nuh stood tall, though his heart was heavy. He knew that everything they had left behind, the villages, the fields, the memories, were gone. But he also knew that this was not the end. It was a new beginning, a cleansing of the earth, a reset of human history. This flood was not only destruction, it was also the mercy of a second chance. The Quran describes it simply, and it was said, O earth, swallow your water, and O sky, withhold your rain. And the water subsided, and the matter was accomplished. And the ship came to rest on the mountain of Judai. Surah Hud 1144. As the rains finally ceased, as the waters began to pull back, as the first rays of light pierced the clouds, the ark shuddered and slowed. It had found its resting place, a quiet, solemn mountain known as Judi. The world, once drowned in pride and arrogance, now lay silent and still. The storm had passed, but the
قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
As the great ark finally came to rest upon Mount Judi, the silence that followed was almost deafening. The sky, once filled with the relentless roar of rain and the thunder of divine justice, was now painted with a fragile calm. The clouds, thin, revealing patches of blue. The winds, which had howled and lashed against the ark, fell still, and beneath it all, the waters receded, whispering as they returned to their rightful places, streams, rivers, and seas. Inside the ark, Nuh breathed deeply, feeling the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. The air smelled different now, fresh, clean, almost new. The believers who had survived with him, those who had clung to faith while the rest of the world mocked, gathered at the edge of the ark, gazing at the emerging landscape below. What they saw was a world washed clean. The earth, once covered in cities and corruption, now glistened with mud and scattered islands of rock. There were no buildings, no statues, no signs of human pride, only nature, raw and reborn. Nuh fell to his knees in gratitude. His hands lifted to the sky. His voice trembled as he spoke words of thanks and remembrance. My Lord, cause me to land at a blessed landing place, and you are the best of those who bring to land. Surah Al-Mu'minun 23:29. His heart, though heavy with the memory of those lost, including his own son and wife, was filled with hope for what lay ahead. This was not merely survival. This was a new beginning, a chance for humanity to learn from its past and to walk forward with humility. Allah's mercy was clear. Despite the corruption and defiance of generations, He had preserved a remnant of the faithful. He had given humanity a second chance, not because they deserved it, but because His mercy is vast and His justice is balanced with grace. The Quran reminds us of this covenant. O Nuh, disembark in peace from us, and blessings upon you and upon nations, descending from those with you. Surah Hud 11:48. This was a divine promise, a reassurance that the future would not be left to chance. It was a declaration that those who follow truth and remember Allah would carry forward a legacy of guidance. The ark's great door creaked open, and one by one, the believers stepped onto the new land. The animals too emerged, pairs of every kind, walking cautiously into a world that had been made anew. The mountain air was crisp, the soil damp but fertile. Life, though fragile, pulsed beneath the surface. Trees would regrow, rivers would carve fresh paths, and mankind, guided by the lessons of Nu, would rebuild. Nu stood at the forefront of this rebirth, not as a king or a conqueror, but as a humble servant. His heart carried the weight of the past, but also the light of hope. His story, though filled with struggle, would serve as a reminder for every generation to come that Allah's justice is certain, but His mercy always leaves a door open. The covenant was not just for Nu and his companions. It was for us. A promise that even when we fall, there is a way back. A promise that faith, no matter how small, can survive even the greatest flood. As the sun set over the resting ark, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a quiet resolve settled in Nu's heart. The flood was over, but the real test, the test of remembrance, obedience, and gratitude, was just beginning.
قال أولم تؤمن قال بلى ولكن ليطمئن.
As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its last golden rays over the resting ark and the quiet, reborn earth, the story of Nu and the Great Flood settled not just into history, but into the very soul of humanity. It is easy to think of this tale as ancient, distant, locked away in the past. But the truth is far more intimate, far more urgent. This story, though born in the earliest days of mankind, is not just about them. It is about us. About every generation that rises, forgets, and faces the consequences of arrogance and disbelief. The flood was not merely an act of punishment. It was a mirror. A reflection of what happens when hearts grow hard, when ears close to truth, when pride takes root and drowns out mercy. Nu's call to his people was not a relic of old. It is the same call that echoes through the Quran today. The same warning whispered to the winds of our time. Worship Allah. Follow the truth. Return before it is too late. For us, there may be no physical ark, no towering flood waters rushing to cleanse our cities. But the floods of heedlessness, of pride, of sin are rising around us every day. The signs are here, as they were then. We see them in the oppression of the weak, in the worship of wealth and power, in the rejection of truth for the comfort of lies. The idols may not be statues of stone, but they are present, carved into our desires, our fears, our distractions. Noah's patience was vast, his faith unshakable, his heart wide enough to plead for people who spat at him. His story teaches us not only about the judgment, but about mercy, about never giving up, about holding on to hope, even when the world mocks, about continuing to speak truth, even when no one listens. His ark was not just a ship, it was a symbol of salvation, a vessel for those who choose to believe, no matter how few. And so the question remains, in the flawed waters of our time, will we be among those who mock or those who believe? Will we stand outside the ark, scoffing at warnings, or will we seek refuge in the mercy of our Creator? The choice is ours. Because though the great flood ended, the test of humanity continues. And the door of the ark, though closed in history, remains open in the heart of every soul that turns back to Allah.